Welcome to Draft Week 2024 BS Centers. I am Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football or the High Stakes Lowdown with Rotoviz, and of course the FFPC. Follow me on the X at Eric Balkman, and welcome into the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show exclusively on the Better Sports Network. It is 7:01 in the PM, and my goodness, do we have a great show for you tonight. I want to welcome in my co-host right now. You know her as the Waiver Queen. She is from Legendary Upside. She does work with the ship chasing crew as well. High stakes redraft, dynasty, best ball degenerate herself. It is Stephanie Miller. Stephanie, thank you so much for hanging out with me on Draft Week.
Thank you for having me. That was quite an introduction.
Well, I mean, I'm just telling the truth. That's all I'm doing. Like, I didn't, like pump you up into something you're not. You're doing all these things. I'll tell you what. In fact, I will give you a chance to pump yourself up right now. For anybody who is not familiar, tell everybody about the Waiver Wire website / newsletter that you have going, that you did throughout the 2023 season. Quite frankly, I don't know how far back it goes, but I think it's really compelling stuff.
Yeah, I started it last year just to kind of get, a little bit of a resume together, and decided to, start tracking just my journey through the high stakes and then running the waivers and then writing up everybody for the waivers and kind of taking a different spin and really specializing in that high stakes. But then I also reached out and did some stuff for like home leagues as well. And, then I ended up getting invited by Pat Corain to bring that write-up basically onto his site for this year. So everything will be on Legendary Upside. That was on, my Fabulous Football. And I spelled it fabulous with like fob.
F-A-A-B.
Fabulous, yes.
Yep.
Play on words there, so.
And all that, and so you're going to continue to do that work, but it'll be on Legendary Upside this season, which is awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
And congratulations to you from starting, I don't want to say from the ground up, but being your own person and getting your content out there, and then getting it picked up by a significant website, one of the biggest out there. That's awesome that you're going to be doing work. And for ship chasing too. Are you popping on every so often?
Yeah. So I'll be on Thursday for their draft show. Probably towards the end when we have all the wide receivers maybe going, appropriately, a little segment there. But and then every week in season on Thursdays where we did our live watching the game, I had a segment on, and that's when I would go over a lot of our teams and how they were doing and performing there. And we'll be doing that this season as well.
It's going to be a banner year, 2024 for Stephanie Miller for Legendary Upside. And for our show tonight, it's going to be a banner show. This is our official NFL draft preview show. And like anything, we cover everything. So we'll get into some veteran stuff tonight, but we'll definitely hit on some rookies. In fact, we're going to have a whole segment spent. The final segment on the show is going to be spent on the potential landing spots, maybe who we hope goes there, how lucrative the spot actually is for Dynasty Fantasy Football with rookie drafts in the FFPC. Kicking off in a couple of weeks. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll lead things off with around the NFL. We'll find out where Stephanie stands on certain players, like the zero RB strategy. We'll get into Keon, Coleman, Brock Bowers, and more there. I'm going to let you talk about Dak Prescott. I know you're very passionate about this, what's going on in Dallas right now. And then we'll talk about some of these polarizing rookies like Braelon Allen, Will Shipley, another guy too. Malachi Corley, we've heard a lot of stuff about him. And then we'll get into your favorite sleeper running back, your favorite sleeper wide receiver, and I'll let you take it with whatever way you want to go. Best ball, rookie draft, however you want to do it. That is coming up in the third segment. And then we'll get into the landing spots section that I talked about right up at the top. Hey, by the way, if you are checking out myffpc.com, Empire Leagues and Dynasty Startups are live over at the FFPC. 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship is live there as well, with a $1 million grand prize and a $6 million prize pool. And both our best ball tournaments are now active. You can sign up for those. Live drafts will start Sunday after the NFL draft is over. Just go to myffpc.com. $100,000 increase in the grand prize in the FFPC best ball tournament this year. Went from $200,000 all the way up to $300,000. So, and that's just $125 entry fee gets you eligible for a $300,000 grand prize. Check that out. myffpc.com. myffpc.com is where to go for that. Shout out to our producer, the man behind the glass, Matt Deutsch, tonight. Let's kick things off with the world champ stuff. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported yesterday, I believe, could have been earlier, could have been Sunday. Rashee Rice is expected to receive, quote, at least a multi-game suspension for his involvement in this car crash in March. Now, let's talk a little bit about the piece that you wrote for Legendary Upside about Rashee Rice. I want you to incorporate the news that we found out regarding the car crash and everything that, the legal stuff that goes into a potential suspension for this year, or maybe not until 2025. We don't know. But you did a lot of other legwork for this piece in regards to what type of player Rashee Rice is going to be this year. I'm going to let you take this whichever way you want to go, because this was an all-encompassing article on Rashee Rice in 2024.
Yeah, so when I wrote the article, I was very bullish on him. He had a great rookie season. He flashed a lot of things that, we wanted to see. He was coming on by the end of the year. He was, they were finally giving him closer to a full-time role. He was playing a lot more than he was. Everything was, looking pretty optimistic. And especially when we were seeing, Travis Kelce's role go down a little bit, that was, there was a lot of things that were setting up where he had room to grow possibly this year and stuff, because he wasn't running a full complement of routes early on stuff. So as great a season as he had, it was possible that he could, have even a better year. And he finished pretty high. So I was thinking that he was going, he was pretty cheap, especially in Dynasty. If you looked at some of the Dynasty ADP compared to, at the time, some of the best ball ADP, which, kind of the redraft, what we had with these early contests, there was a big gap where he was going way earlier in the best ball stuff than he was in Dynasty. So that kind of was signaling to me that, some people were undervaluing him, and that I thought he was, a really big buy. So then, of course, we have his car crash and all of this greatest and latest escapades. And, people react. So he started falling. If you played any of these best ball contests, you saw him start to fall. I think a lot of people overreact to things. There's a lot, at first there's a lot you don't know. You got to step back. You got to see how has the NFL handled these type of situations? What actually happened, and all of that. So, then we got the charges, and I think it was like 6 charges is what it ended up being, something like that. It was like an aggravated assault, collision with serious injury. I think there were 6 counts of collision involving an injury. So we weren't sure, what to do with all that, really. But in my head, I was thinking,
we're still kind of not, right? We're still kind of
we still don't know. There's a lot we still don't know. But I mean, we know that nobody died as a result of the crash. And I mean, there's some serious injuries, but nobody was like, I don't think, still in intensive care or anything like that from what we heard, So the degree is, it may be bad, but not dire, I guess. It could have been worse as far as the injury stuff goes. So when we look at what the NFL has done, I mean, obviously we had Ruggs, but he killed somebody.
Right.
But then we had like Jordan Addison last year. We even had Marquise Brown. I mean, other guys were speeding, and the NFL didn't even make a statement really about it. Like, they did little to nothing. So my initial reaction was, unless we get news that there was like, a worse outcome of the people that were injured or additional charges, or, when they started having rumors of like weapons or more drugs or things like that, which seemed to get quelled. It doesn't seem like that anything came of those. That maybe at worst there would be a couple game suspension, but I was thinking there was a good possibility he might not get anything. Then, it seemed like, we got the Schefter news, and he has the felonies. But I mean, in my opinion, he's going to get a good lawyer. I mean, it seems like I would be very surprised if he went to jail. I feel like they're probably going to be able to play those down to misdemeanors. And they'll probably end up having to pay, restitution or whatever to people. But
what about
financially?
Well, totally. And what about the fact that how slow the legal process moves in the NFL. Well, in real life.
In real life, yeah.
But then the NFL is not going to react to it. I mean, there's a non-zero chance that Rice doesn't get suspended at all in 2024, which would make, and by the way, I'll tell you this, his ADP, like we saw him going in it's sometimes the early second round, believe it or not, in drafts, according to Fantasy Mojo at fantasymojo.com. Always give Darren Armani a shout out. If you're playing on the FFPC, get a subscription to that. We saw him in, I want to say this was early March, late February. We saw him going as high as the early second. And in fact, he was still going in the mid-second, coming up in, kind of right before this whole thing went down in mid to late March. He was still going as a mid-second round pick. Now we've seen him fall. And with the FFPC best ball, number 2 early best ball tournament close, we saw his final ADP come out in that tournament as wide receiver 24 at the 410. That's right behind Devontae Smith. That's right behind Cooper Kupp. It's right ahead of DK Metcalf, right ahead of Zay Flowers. Another guy who we just found out is not going to have any legal repercussions for the incident he was involved in. So Rashee Rice, wide receiver 24 at the 410. Steph, are we going too high, too low on Rashee Rice at that spot? Or like Goldilocks, is that just right?
I think I'm pretty comfortable. I mean, I do try to push him in drafts a little bit, because there's a good chance he falls. So I'll take it. But, when we also go back to what actually I wanted to touch on, what Adam Schefter said, he said he's likely to have multi-games. Multi to me, I mean, it's still very vague.
Yes.
More than one. And like I said, I was already thinking possibly 2 games, possibly 3 games. I really still don't feel like, I mean, I don't know, but there wouldn't be much more than that. And like you say, we don't even know if it'll happen this year or next year, or how quickly the system will play out. So in redraft, I'm fine buying the dip. I have a ton of him in early best ball drafts. So I'm still, right now where his ADP is going, I'm fine with it. Like I said, I do just tend to push it since I already have a good amount of exposure to try to see, because then I could get some different combinations, with players that, you can't normally get with him because of how ADP falls. But in Dynasty, if you can buy low, by all means, because I mean, it's very hard for me to see a big picture scenario where this is career ending or something.
Right.
So, in Dynasty, even if, he has some less production this year or next year or whenever the punishments occur, so what?
Yeah.
I mean,
I always think like when it comes to buying low in Dynasty, it's like you got to almost do it like right as it's happening or right after it happens. Like that's when you get your biggest deal. And again, I know we're dealing with humans. I don't want to dehumanize anybody in this. I don't want to dehumanize Rashee Rice because we're, talking about buying a player. I don't want to dehumanize the victims that were involved in this at all. But we're, like I always said, when we come talk about fantasy football, we're buying stats. We're acquiring stats, not people. And the thing with Rice here is, if you were able to get him for a song, and I saw some people do it. Theo Greminger from Player Profiler put up a big tweet on X, or a big X on X, I guess, about how he was able to get Rashee Rice basically for a song. But he did it right away, because the longer this goes on, the more reporting we see done. Okay, well, like you said, Steph, nobody died. This isn't as serious as the Ruggs thing. Now we're talking about maybe a Camara level delay in legal proceedings where it goes to 2025. And even in Dynasty, I mean, are you really worried about a multi-game suspension? Probably not, because especially for a player this young in Rashee Rice. So that's the legal part of it. That's the off-field part of it, which I think is we're all kind of warming up to Rice in that regard. However, and maybe not however, because I read the article on Legendary Upside that you wrote. Man, there's a lot of things to like about what happened with Rashee Rice in 2023 and how that translates to a leap for him in 2024. I'm not telling you to give away everything here, but some of the stuff that you found out about that really makes you bullish on Rashee Rice, who you admittedly said you were already bullish on him coming into this, and then you found out the research kind of backed up that point.
Oh, yeah. I kind of actually, when I went to write the article, I wasn't sure who I was going to write it about. I kind of looked at, some of the numbers and what some of the rookies and, even I was considering even possibly like second or third year players, put up to see like, okay, who can, who's flashing some of, what are some of these stats that we want to look for that are showing for the next season? Because predicting in fantasy football is really hard. And there's a lot of stuff that's not very predictive at all. A lot of these stats and things we look at might describe the situation, but very few actually have a correlation with what happens the next season. And the biggest thing that happens is how many fantasy points you scored the season before. So, there's one of those things, and he did pretty well. But then we also looked at, his yards per route run, some stuff like that. And he was, showing actually even PFF grade had a pretty good correlation over the next season. So a couple things like that, and he was just started to pop. And then, like I said, when I saw where we had him ranked on Legendary Upside and then some of the other sites around the industry and seeing where he was going in best ball, it just made a lot of sense. And I was like, okay, this is a guy that is going possibly too early in redraft because there's a lot more risk there.
Right.
Because if he takes longer to develop now, because when a guy flashes, that means, okay, he could come out the next year, but it might take an extra year. Because a lot of times, we don't see wide receivers hit their peak in, year 1, year 2, year 3. I mean, it could be year 4, year 5, I think wide receiver peaks are closer to like 27, something like that. So for production, a lot of times. So, I mean, there's a lot of time to go.
I was, after the season ended and I started looking forward to 2024 drafts, one of the players I thought that I was going to be heavy on in my leagues was Rashee Rice because of how he came on at the end of the season, the fact that he's got Patrick Mahomes, the fact that offense, it doesn't matter what you do to it, it still produces. And then I saw him as a sometimes early second round pick. I'm like, whoa, I think I'm actually out on this guy right now. But now because of this legal stuff, it's actually dropped off. And I'm not necessarily concerned about the legal stuff for Dynasty. I'm starting more and more to be less and less concerned about it, if that makes any sense, for redraft in best ball leagues and everything like that, as Rashee Rice is now going in the late 4th round. But check that article out from Stephanie Miller at legendaryupside.com. It's free. You can check it out. It's lengthy, but it's very well put together, very informative in that as well. Moving on to a rookie, because it is NFL draft week. ESPN's Mike Reese, Steph, says that the Patriots are considered, quote, most likely to remain at number 3 and select a quarterback. Now, the Boston Herald, MassLive.com, reported that the Patriots' 3rd overall pick in the draft, the offers they've been getting for it have been, quote, laughable. Now, again, this is April 23rd. You can never trust exactly what you're hearing, but this is the latest report we're hearing. Now, New England is probably going to be able to draft, should they want to, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or J.J. McCarthy if they stay put at 3. I still think Daniels goes at number 2, but that's not a given with Washington. We'll see what they do. Caleb Williams, I think, is all but a lock to go number 1. They do have Jacoby Brissett on this team, but your thoughts on who New England should go with, and maybe to put a fantasy twist on it, Steph, who represents the best the best landing spot for fantasy purposes between Daniels, May, and McCarthy for New England?
For New England, nobody. But if I have to pick, but Jaden Daniels would be my choice if I had to pick for fantasy-wise, because I think that with all his rushing, he doesn't need all the passing to hold him up. So he would be impacted the least. But it's starting to sound like he's probably going to Washington. So, I still don't want Drake May to go there. I wouldn't care as much if J.J. McCarthy went there. I think. I mean, it depends. But the problem is whoever goes there, I mean, they're kind of walking into a situation with not a very good receiver room. I mean, it's still not set up for any of the quarterbacks to succeed. So I don't know. It's like I don't know. Maybe they are really getting really bad offers. But I mean, if they got like a huge haul, it's hard for me to imagine they wouldn't want to trade back some and still, maybe get be able to get some firepower in that offense to set up a quarterback. maybe they're just trying to drive the price up. Maybe there's a lot of, some of this is a song and dance, what they're putting out there in the media to try to get, a better package. We'll see. But I've heard also that there was a little bit of a discrepancy that Robert Kraft really wants a quarterback, and he's like digging his heels in about that. So who really is running the show might kind of come into play there as well.
Absolutely, it does. So if you had your druthers and you're in a Superflex FFPC Dynasty rookie draft, let's say that, for example, and you are like, you want the best, obviously, for all the quarterbacks. Who's the quarterback that you want to go to New England because you want the other three guys to excel, right? Caleb Williams, Drake May, JJ McCarthy, and Jaden Daniels. Who's the quarterback? If you have to pick one, who's the quarterback that you want to go to New England because you want the other three to really be successful rookie draft choices?
I want to see Jaden go to New England because, like I said, I think he still will be okay. I would love for Drake May to somehow get to the Vikings. That would be, I think, fabulous. I like him still better than JJ McCarthy, and that because that offense is killer. Better than Washington. So
yes, that's true.
That would be an ideal situation. So maybe, I guess, I'm not sure, Washington is taking possibly JJ McCarthy, which I'd have a hard time imagining if they stay at 2. I feel like that would have to be probably a situation where they move back, and I don't know how likely that is, but I've seen a few. Yeah. I've seen a few scenarios where it's happened. So you never know. I mean, this year is insane that there's a possibility that we could see like 4 quarterbacks off the board, possibly in a row, which I think is like the first time ever.
Yeah, it would be. It would be.
So,
I'm just looking. So I brought up the New England depth chart as we were destroying the skill position players there. So New England right now for wide receivers and tight ends, KJ Osborne, Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton, Jalen Reagor, Kayshon Boutte, and then a tight end, Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper. Yuck.
They just signed another tight end too.
Who did they sign? I missed it.
I forgot. It was like yesterday. If somebody I did it, I recognized the name. I didn't write it down, but I saw it and I was thinking in my head, I was like, oh, because I was laughing. I was like, just what they need, another tight end.
Tight end, yeah. Oh, it was Mitchell Wilcox.
There Mitchell, it is. Yeah.
From Cincinnati.
No, I knew I heard of it. I was like, no, I remember he had a minor role somewhere else, but I was like, I saw that yesterday. I was like, oh my gosh.
So I want to get out. Okay, here's what I want to do. I want to talk about a potential New England receiver and how valuable he could be if the Patriots utilize the number 34 overall pick on him. But let's do that later on in the program because I think that's a fun exercise we can do for sure. Now, you talked about Drake May. Jordan Renan, who covers the Giants for ESPN, reported that, again, April 23rd, take this for what it's worth, but there is, quote, a strong belief by some in the league, which is about as vague of a statement as you can get, that the Giants are actually going after Drake May. Now, the Giants would have to trade up to get him, I'm assuming, because they would not be able to get him where they currently stand in the draft. Can you tell us a little bit about not necessarily what Drake May means for Giants football going forward, but I want to get into what you said something a little bit earlier. You like May a little bit better than JJ McCarthy. And while that was a popular opinion a couple of months ago, I feel like it's not as popular as it was before, that May is above McCarthy. Can you tell us a little bit about why you like May as a pro better than JJ McCarthy, and how big is the distance between the two as well?
I mean, I think like for fantasy, I think it's probably pretty big. I mean, Drake May is still, a lot of people for some reason don't realize how much of a rushing is part of his game as well when we talk about wanting these dual threat quarterbacks. And he was also super effective at throwing deep over the field in the middle, which is another thing that we really like for fantasy. He had, I think it was like an 8.6% like big time throw rate down the middle of the field, which was one of the highest, if not the highest, I think, of all the quarterbacks coming in this year. So another thing he does a lot of is he scrambled even when there wasn't pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So he looks like, I mean, like moving around is a big part of his game. And he was also like, he also scored quite a few touchdowns rushing. Like he's a big guy. So they could use him like at the goal line, kind of like a Josh Allen or something like that. I've heard a lot of people describe him as like a more aggressive Justin Herbert. Like he was really aggressive throwing the ball and stuff. So it's like, let's see, giving me some sort of mix between those guys sounds pretty damn good for fantasy. And he looks to throw when he's scrambling around. Like he's not running to run. Like he wants to get the ball downfield. So that's why, you know, there's still some pass catchers that he could really bring up, where that's another thing with kind of Jaden Daniels. He wants to run, and he's not the biggest guy. And there's some concern there that taking hits, you know, how well he'll be able to withstand it, where I'll say the biggest drawback, I think, with May, I've heard, is, you know, some of his footwork and then some of his decision making, where like when things kind of go bad, they go from bad, like he does something that makes it from bad to worse.
And I think with those two things, like they're correctable, right? Like footwork is totally correctable. That might be like a 1 year thing, like where he's, you know, footwork we're not even talking about. Decision making, I think too, is something, if he gets the right coach, maybe he's not going to make the best decisions in the world right away, but that comes with the experience. To double down on what you're saying about rushing, bear in mind that in not this past season, the year before, 698 rushing yards. So basically 700 rushing yards. He gets in the end zone 7 times. This past year, on 72 fewer rushes, he still rushed for 450 yards, and then he got in the end zone 9 times. And that's a 3.8 and a 4.0 average. But bear in mind, in college, they count sacks as rushing yards too. So like this is actually a lot better than, and those numbers on the surface are pretty good. This is actually a lot better in the pros too, because those numbers would be much higher. And to your point, he's 6'4", he's 230. The size concerns people have about Jaden Daniels, not the same with Drake May. And JJ McCarthy, I mean, like I know he's not Drake May size, but he's another guy that is not as big. And I think the question marks for him, and this goes back to a lot of the film people, like you didn't see it as much with McCarthy on the field as you did with May. And that's not a rip on McCarthy. I mean, this is a guy that was sat on several games in the fourth quarter for the entire fourth quarter because Michigan beat them. They were obliterating whoever they were playing. Against Ohio State, one of the best teams in the country, they ran the ball like 30 some times in a row. McCarthy was never needed to do anything, but just because your college team says, hey, we don't need you to do this, doesn't mean you can't do it. Now, May, I think I'm with you. I think we've seen a much bigger body of work that okay, he can get it done. And sometimes I think when you have that big body of work, the footwork, the decision-making, that gets amplified a little bit. Not saying they're not issues, but I am saying that sometimes it can be amplified. But I think the May versus McCarthy thing is fascinating. And assuming that it's Williams and it's Daniels, and then that pick for the Patriots at 3, they're going to go with McCarthy or they're going to go with May. That is going to be fun to watch on Thursday night. Just one of the many fun things that's going to happen on Thursday night. And we'll go to New York for this next part, Steph. Rich Simony, who covers the Jets for ESPN, he thinks that the Jets selection at number 10 overall could come down to an offensive tackle. Pick one, I don't know. Or Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, and I'll kind of let you weigh on him a little bit here in regards to catching passes from Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers historically has not necessarily thrown to the tight end a whole lot, and I don't necessarily blame him, because the Packers, outside of Jermichael Finley until he got hurt, they never really had a big-time stud tight end. Yeah, they had Jared Cook towards the end. They had Martellus Bennett at the very end, but they never had that real stud tight end. So I understand why Rodgers didn't throw to him a whole lot. But if Brock Bowers does land in New York, Steph, I mean, this could be very, very interesting if you were a believer in Brock Bowers as a tight end. How would he fit in New York?
I mean, Brock Bowers is okay. First of all, people want to think of him as like a tight end. Think of him more as an offensive weapon. Like when we always say we want to see like guys be able to take some snaps, maybe like out of the slot, he really could. Mm-hmm. Like he was phenomenal. You know, he was playing on Georgia that had like a stacked team. So he's on there with some other like really talented wide receivers that are going in this draft as well. And he was pretty much outproducing everybody. I mean, he was phenomenal. Also, he was doing some things with his yards per route run. He had a 3.01 his first season, which is phenomenal for a wide receiver. And he's a tight end.
He's a tight end. That's right.
And like he was actually the only wide receiver in this class that have a higher career yards per route run than Bowers is Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors,
who are legendary generational talents,
like in their own tiers. So, I mean, Brock Bowers is as good as the receivers. I think the biggest argument is, should you take a tight end that early in the draft overall? Which, you know, some people are saying no, because of, you know, how much you're paying them for the position, that it's not worth it. Right. But I mean, for what Bowers, I think, can do for your team. And poor Rodgers, I think it's been something like 16 seasons and he's never had a wide receiver or a tight end in the first round.
It's true. It's very true.
I mean, I'm sure he would be more than happy to throw to Bowers. And like I said, I mean, he's just so athletic, and he can work all over the field, all three levels of the field. Like he's going to, and he's a nightmare for, you know, defensive coach, you know, to scheme against him and stuff. Like he's going to be amazing for any team. Now, I do worry a little bit about the creativity of the Jets being the team to deploy him the right way and to, you know, maximize him. Hopefully they will use him as, you know, the Swiss Army knife to put everywhere and, you know, actually do some really cool stuff with. So we'll see. But I mean, I would love it, because I mean, seems like Joe Alt, I think that's the top tackle. He's probably going to be gone. So it seems like the most likely scenario would probably be Bowers, unless maybe like Chicago makes a turn and takes it, but I don't know, or somebody jumps in front of him.
Yeah, I hadn't considered the Bowers to the Bears at all, because they have Kmet there.
Yeah.
They have Gerald Everett, but neither one of those has the upside and the talent, obviously, of Brock Bowers. And as far as like the other tackles they could go with at that point, I mean, you might just want to trade down. I mean, you got Fuaga from Oregon State, you have Fashanu from Penn State, I mean, and Fautanu from Washington as well. So you have all three of those guys. Wow, all three of them starting with the last name F. This is craziness. But you could obviously trade down if you're New York from 10 and move into the mid-teens and get one of those guys and pick up some draft capital. It's obviously a deep wide receiver class as well. We know that the Jets could use some more perimeter threats to go along with Garrett Wilson too. So that's going to be fascinating to watch. It's kind of just this draft. I mean, you mentioned it, stuff like we could see 4 quarterbacks with the first 4 picks. We could see a tight end in the top 10. We will probably see 3 wide receivers in the top 10 as well. It's that first 10 picks is going to be amazing, and we could see 6 receivers go off the board. I'm excited. Well, I'm psyched for it. We've just scraped the surface on the NFL draft and fantasy football as it stands tonight. Let's pop out and take a quick break. When we come back, Steph Miller from Legendary Upside is going to she's going to tell us where she stands on certain players. We're going to talk about Ricky Pearsall. We'll get into Keon Coleman as well. And we're going to lead things off with one polarizing running back at the top of the rookie draft class. She's Stephanie Miller from Legendary Upside and Ship Chasing. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on the Better Sports Network right after this.
The thing with Dynasty is that it's so hard to get a good league going. Like, it's very difficult to get all these friends that are going to be paying attention, or they're going to stick with it, and they're not going to say, "Oh, I don't want to play anymore. My team stinks. Find somebody else next year." And then you're collecting dues, and then you're getting in arguments, and you're arguing with people on Twitter about dues. Like, we've seen too much of that going on. So it's very difficult. And what happens is you find like 5 or 6 good people that want to play, and then you don't have enough people, and you fill the league with a bunch of weirdos. So what I like doing, honestly, at this stage is if I'm going to play Dynasty, I want to play on a nice, clean, serious, professional site, and I go to FFPC to play, right? FFPC has never had a league fold. Eric Balkman over there told me that. He's like, if somebody has to leave a league, we just fill it. So your option is you can go and do a startup, and like Jack said in the chat, you start it, and then you go and you figure out who you're going to take from the top down. And if you want to do like a long rebuild, or a long-term team, or if you want to try and win right away and get a bunch of vets, you can do that. Or you can adopt an orphan team, and with that you go out and somebody quit, and that's so much fun, because then you take their team and you have all these guys that you like, but then you have all of these guys that they had that you don't like, and that's actually way more fun, because then you can trade all those guys, and it's so much fun to trade. Like when I go to orphan teams, I used to say, "Oh, I'm not going to take this team because all the players, I don't like them. I only want players I do like." But I've realized that it's actually more fun to take the teams that have a couple guys you really like and a couple guys that everyone else likes that you don't like, and then trade them. Like go and grab an orphan team like Gabe Davis and trade him to some Gabe Davis guy. So go do that now. Use you can use the QR code here or a link in the description, or go to myffpc.com. Just make sure you use promo code COOP when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more. And that's another thing. When you make a league with your friends, Coop isn't giving you $25, right? You have to pay the full dues. This time you get a little discount. So yeah, go over there. And also for you maniacs out there, they do have high stakes leagues. So these leagues, if you want, you can go big time. I know some of the redraft leagues, we announced on this channel a redraft league that 10K buy-in. I'm not sure the dynasty ones go that high, but they go into the thousands. So if you want to take this real seriously and get crazy with it, do it. That's the place to do it. myffpc.com, promo code COOP, baby. Go get set up.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on here on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, joined by Stephanie Miller from Legendary Upside and Ship Chasing tonight on the show. Hey, if you're looking for some Dynasty action, we're about to talk some Dynasty Fantasy Football. Go over to myffpc.com for the Empire Leagues and Dynasty Leagues that have been set up for startups going forward in 2024. Those drafts will start on April 29th, so you're basically got about 6 days away before those drafts start. Live drafts, slow drafts, whatever you want to do, they start at $100 and go on up from there. myffpc.com is where to go, myffpc.com. You follow her on the X at Steph Miller 57. Did I get that right? Is it Steph Miller 57? That's
it is.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's talk rookies here. I'm going to – well, here's what I want to do. I'm going to open it up with a dynasty rookie here, and then I want to get into some veterans that may or may not be affected by the draft. Is Jonathon Brooks your RB1 for dynasty rookies this year? And if so, why? And if it's not him, who is it?
It is.
Why? Yeah. Why is he above everybody else in this class for you, Steph?
I mean, just what we saw. His last year before he had his ACL tear, he was looking really good. I mean, he's got a good size. He's got good speed. He can catch. He could be a full 3-down back. Mm-hmm. And the only, thing, like, he didn't have a huge body of work, but he was also, he was playing for Texas. And before that, he was behind Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. So there's a reason. The only thing I would say is, like, they didn't use him as a pass catcher a ton. And like I said, because they have those guys. But when they were gone and it was just him, he did see an increase in some routes and stuff. But, I mean, he was really impressive. He's really good in the open field. He has some good breakaway ability. He's very, very elusive. So there's a lot to like there. And like I said, I really think he could be, get all the work in an offense. He's shown an ability to be a workhorse, which is something that a lot of these backs haven't. And I don't think have in this class necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, number one, he's the best of a mediocre bunch, right? So we'll say that up at the top. But I almost wonder, Steph, like, had he not torn his ACL, I mean, are we talking about a first-round pick here? Because he's not going to go in the first round. And I don't know if that's just simply because of the ACL or if there are other questions. You're right. I mean, when you look at his stats from last year, once he got Bijan Robinson and the guy, Roschon Johnson, out of the way that you said, almost 200 carries, got well over 1,100 yards, 25 catches, which we always love to see from our running backs as well. He got in the end zone 11 times last year. And this is all before he tore his ACL in November. So there was still some more stats to be gotten too with Brooks. And you said and forgive me for forgetting, you said it's a pretty big distance between Brooks and your number 2 running back?
Not a huge distance, no. I have him and Trey Benson pretty close.
Okay. All right.
As top 2 that I think have a bigger ceiling than the other guys from what we've seen. I mean, of course, landing spot will be huge for these running backs and the capital they end up getting. I do think, like you say, I mean, because even with the ACL, he's projected to go in the second round right now, it seems like. So it makes all the sense in the world that he could have easily probably been a first-round pick. Now, it's hard to say who would have gotten bumped out, maybe, since this is such a deep, with skilled players, especially those wide receivers. But, it'd be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think about some of the teams that are picking, late in the first round that would have, looked at Jonathon Brooks. I mean, Kansas City, why not, right? Mm-hmm. Baltimore could probably use a stud there to take over for Derrick Henry when he's done. I don't necessarily think. I think there's a little bit of a duplication of skills with Brooks and James Cook in Buffalo, but Arizona's picking 27th. I mean, James Conner's not going to live forever in fantasy, so that would have certainly been a nice little landing spot for Jonathon Brooks there. But we'll see. I think the great thing that we know about Brooks is that whatever team takes in the second round, they have plans on using him and using him a lot as soon as he's healthy enough to do so. Steelers running back Stephanie. This is fantastic for the second or third consecutive year. The gap between Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren has gotten closer and closer to the point in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball tournament. They were separated by just 3 slots as far as running backs go. Najee Harris went off at running back 24 at the 7-11. Jaylen Warren went off as running back 27 at the 8:05. So you're looking at about a half round difference between those 2 players. I've talked to a lot of high stakes players over the years, and not over the years, but since this was a thing. And they have told me, like, because Warren was so cheap, they always envision, like, well, let me just take Warren instead of Harris because I don't have to invest nearly the draft capital into getting Warren as I do Harris. Now they're almost at the same spot, Steph. Like, has the hate gone too far, as Matthew Berry would say? Has the hate gone too far on Najee Harris? And he should be the guy when you're talking about getting him in the late 7th. Where do you stand on the Steelers running backs right now?
Well, I think that we are finally getting it right. I mean, Jaylen Warren's been the more talented back. I mean, just because he was originally undrafted, he's flashed a lot more talent, and he's the one that's got the receiving ability. Last year, it's like we thought, okay, he flashed talent his rookie year, and we thought that maybe he could earn a little bit more of a bigger role, but he's just showing a lot. And he was so much more efficient on a lower volume than Najee. It was pretty eye-opening if you look at some of his stats. And then he finished last year, I think, as RB17 in yards per route run. He had 1.24, and and then in ESPN's receiver rankings, he was RB2 behind only Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler. Mm-hmm. So he's got a lot of that upside that we want to see with receiving. And then he was, still the better rusher last year as well.
He's he's a much more efficient player. I mean, clearly. than
on so
Jalen Warren.
much. Yeah, the volume. And then when we have Warren, I mean, the biggest thing with Warren is I think he's still going to have the goal line role.
Yeah.
But more what it is I'm willing to take Najee now, where before there was no way because I thought he was just so overpriced because it was like you say, why not? Now they are close enough that I think it makes sense that you could. I've taken them both on a team together because of the capital you're spending. And I think that Pittsburgh's going to use running backs quite a bit. I mean, we've seen, what Arthur Smith does.
Right. And that's
on his team. So
that's the wrinkle we throw into this right now is Arthur Smith. And obviously, we dread Arthur Smith or whatever, but he does use running backs quite a bit. And maybe this is a case where, both of these guys end up returning and maybe more than return on their draft value here, Steph, as they're, respectively at late 7th and a mid 8th round pick.
Yeah, I think Jaleel Ward was one of my, if not the most drafted players on all my best ball teams last year. And I'm pretty sure he's close up to the top again so far this year. So,
one of the other players, and forgive me, I don't know if Jaleel McLaughlin was one of your biggest drafted players in 2023 or if he already is in 2024. But I know there was plenty of steam picking up for him. I remember, facilitating a lot of these high stakes drafts in Las Vegas last year for the FFPC. And it seemed like McLaughlin went up like a round or two as we got deeper and deeper into the weekend. Like there was a lot of heat for him last year. And now again, this year, it seems like he's going to have an opening. Javonte Williams may have just showed us what he is post ACL tear. I don't necessarily know if I'm married to that right now, but I do understand what the stats and what my eyes are telling me with Williams. But McLaughlin is an interesting guy. Where do you stand on Jaleel McLaughlin this year, Steph?
So I said, okay, so I lied. Jaleel McLaughlin's my highest drafted running back right now. I wasn't on him like during the early drafts in Vegas last year as much. Like I started to hear his name, but I didn't know a ton. There was a waiver period where he was like the hottest ad.
Yep.
For a week, and then they started using all three of their backs, and then a lot of people dropped him, and then we went to pick him up again. It's kind of that fun game. But when he was playing, I mean, Jaleel was so good, like so good. He was RB2 in yards per attempt. He was RB9 yards per carry after contact. He was RB14 in breakaway percentage. He was RB6 in yards per route run. He was RB13 in run grade for PFF, and he was the RB3 in elusiveness. I mean, he was like, when we look at these stats, like he was playing so well. And when you look like you were kind of alluding to as well, Javonte did not play well. Now, we were happy to see him on the field earlier than we thought after that injury. And, there is a little bit something to saying the second year off of ACL, you should see somebody improve. I have a kinesiology background and I've worked on injuries with players, helping like through some of these rehab processes and stuff, not necessarily professional athletes, but people in general.
Right.
So, I have a little bit of a feel when you're in there and, you do see a bigger improvement, but here's the thing, you still may never get back to what you were, and it's hard to quantify like what you've lost because we don't know what was, and he hasn't really shown us that much in the NFL. So he may not have been the guy we thought he was, in general. That's more what I'm worried about. So yeah, maybe he'll look a little better this year, but I don't know how much, and I don't know if it's ever going to be better than the other guys. And then the one thing I'm a little worried about, because I was assuming with some of my early drafting, was that they were going to cut Samaje Perine, and they haven't. So like I said before, I don't want them to be running for fantasy-wise a 3-man backfield because Samaje, I believe I have to look up. I don't have it in front of me. He was still a good pass catcher. He still had really high yards per route run, maybe like really high. So he could take some of that part of the receiving role. Now, in my mind, I was wondering possibly, though, if he was doing that, we could see Jaleel being more of maybe they push out Williams more than the other way around. I don't know. Or, they split some of the early down work and then he gets it, but it's enough that he's just so much more efficient. Because we've seen some of these guys that are, super efficient like that can break off these big runs. They don't need the volume to pay off.
Mm-hmm.
Like Devon A-Chain, for example, or somebody. It's like they don't, every time they touch the ball, it's possibly a home run.
Yep.
So, and especially when playing best ball, those type of weeks and where they're going, where they're being drafted, what you're paying for them, you don't need a ton.
I didn't even realize this last year, getting back to Perine. He had 53 carries. Yeah. He had 50 catches, which like Samaje Perine, you wouldn't think 5'10", 236. He's this pass catcher, but he caught 50 balls last year for 455 yards. He averaged 9.1 yards per carry as yards per catch as well, which is really, really good for Perine.
Yeah.
Rubio, I think it was Rubio in the YouTube chat posted, please tell me why Javonte isn't a good late pick in 2024, a year after the injury. So I can tell you this, Steph, and I'll let you weigh in on it. Currently in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball tournament, which actually is closed right now. So this is what he ended at in this tournament a little bit less than a week ago. Running back 48 is running back 26 for Javonte Williams at the 802. Is that a place that you'd want to be in business with Javonte Williams, or is that still too high based on what you've seen from him so far?
I still take Javonte. So just because I was, again, in on McLaughlin doesn't mean I was necessarily out on Javonte.
Okay.
So I do still, because I think that there is still a case, like you say, of some upside, and he's still cheap enough. I mean, I don't mind his price. I mean, odds are he still is going to at least start off the season. I think it's the lead running back, but, the talent, it's more the case that possibly McLaughlin is the more talented back that could come on eventually or, start to overtake him. But right now, I mean, I'm still at that price comfortable taking some shots. He's not a guy I'm fully fading by any means. And I mean, sometimes, when we're talking best ball, it's a little confusing to people that don't play, the quantity that some of us play. It's like we have a big portfolio. So it's like when we take stands on players, we might have what we say, like being even with the field at like, an 8% of a guy, and then might take like a softer fade or go heavier than that, of how much exposure. But there's not a whole lot of, there is some guys, but there's not a whole lot of guys that I take absolutely zero of unless I just think they're like sorely mispriced or there's just no reason,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's a little different than people that might be just drafting one or two fantasy teams, for example. Then it's like, you might want to get your guys a little more in that and be a little more discriminating.
Yeah. And that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's all depends upon how much of a volume drafter you are. If you went 0 RB in drafts this year, obviously you'd be looking at Jaleel McLaughlin. Well, even if you didn't go 0 RB, you'd be looking at Jaleel McLaughlin because he is so cheap. Running back 48, 1307 right now in the Never Too Early Best Ball tournament with the FFPC. Speaking of 0 RB, Stephanie, where do you stand on that strategy in 2024? I feel like it gets called into question every single year. But this year, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it seems a little bit louder. Where do you stand on that strategy in best ball?
I mean, right now, it's been perfect. I mean, I think a combination of just all these guys that we used to go really early as running backs. It's kind of a changing of the guard type thing. A lot of them are now changing teams. They're in their second contracts and stuff. So they're going in that, quintessential RBZ dead zone.
Mm-hmm.
And they're fitting the profile of what a dead zone back is. Like I said, if you're, a dynasty player, that a lot of times you want to get rid of your running backs before that second contract hits. You don't want them after 25. And if you're picking them up, you could buy them in season, like a veteran, really cheap, just to compete, maybe, if they're putting up numbers or doing things. But, you don't want to hold guys. You're going to lose value on them. So a lot of the 0 RB is you assume that running backs in general, there's going to be a lot of chaos throughout the season. They're going to get hurt and things. And these guys are going to have roles deeper in the draft. And they're going to have an ability to put up, you're going to find these guys who can put up the same amount of points or get you things. And that's just not true at like the wide receiver position as much as it is like running back. So it's kind of a way to play into that chaos instead of, you know, going against it, that anti-fragility type thing that, you know, Sean Siegel was the original father of Zero RB, wrote his article and, you know, goes to explain. But also, and I totally lost my train of thought. But
regarding like the Zero RB specifically, how it's working this year, you're finding that when you look at your builds in your drafts after it's done, you're finding like, oh, wow, this really fell into place with me. This Zero RB really fell into place again in this draft. And it's been happening multiple times for you, right?
I mean, like when you're going through, it just makes sense because, I mean, I want to target wide receivers early.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're looking at, like I said, who's there kind of after those first couple rounds, those guys aren't that interesting. And then we're having all these guys that we're talking about that are so talented that could very well end up, there's a lot of ambiguous situations, being possibly the guy. Mm-hmm. So it's like, why not take those cheaper shots? And another thing I think also that's coming into this season is I've seen, we don't have a first round tight end. And especially like on FFPC, that's, you know, some, as people know, don't forget, it's tight end premium. You know, those tight ends are important. And I mean, we had Kelsey for so long going as a first round pick, but now, you know, he's falling. And then we got Mark Andrews was hurt last year. People have kind of slowed down on him. And
even Laporta, McBride, Kincaid, as exciting as those young players are, none of them have cracked into the top, into the first round, to your point.
Yeah. I mean, Laporta's going the earliest from what I've seen. I was like, unless ADP's changed, and I love Laporta. I've taken a little less of him just because I don't see the gap between even him and the next bunch of guys. And I take all of them. I mean, I've done a lot of even bully, especially on FFPC. I have no problem doing it, you know, taking more than one of those tight ends because you could play them in your flex and things like that. Yep. And they score you those points because there is such a drop off at the position. But that's another thing. So doing the Zero RB, it lets you take those, get some wide receivers, take a detour, get, you know, whether it's the tight ends, or again, you know, a lot of those quarterbacks aren't going super early like we saw last year. You know, we saw a lot of the really early elite. They're going at a pretty decent price, I think. So getting some of them. And then by the time, and then it kind of falls into when their wide receivers dry up. And then when that tier of tight ends, I'd say probably, you know, like around like Ferguson, Njoku are probably the last of the decent tight ends. And that's still a tier below some of the guys we're talking about. But that's really where you get all of these running backs that could have a good role, like coming up in your drafts. So it just like all plays into that type of structure working so well. And you'll notice there's like all of a sudden you go from loving all the wide receivers to, okay.
Yep.
Where'd they all, you know, everybody
Where'd they go?
You could take a quarterback in a lot of that range too, if you want, you know, a second, but that's just kind of when like all of a sudden running backs start to look like the best things on the board. Anyways.
So we had a question in the YouTube chat from Miguel Robinson about the tight end 2 in not redraft, but in rookies drafts this year. Obviously Brock Bowers going as the number 1, but Ben sent, and I've heard it pronounced different ways. So I don't know if it's Sinnott or Sinnott, whatever it is, the dude from Kansas State, and then Jatavian Sanders, who I think for the most part was going as the number 2 tight end. I think he still basically is out of Texas. I know Mock Draft Database has, you know, probably about 20, 25 picks separating those two right now. But your thoughts for fantasy between Sinnott and Sanders? Is one of those guys sticking out to you more than the other at all, Steph?
I was really big on Sanders for a while. And then we saw his pro day and it was not good. You know, what I wanted to see out of him, it was pretty disappointing. So, and, you know, it seemed like it's going to affect possibly, you know, his capital some and some other things. And right now in our dynasty rankings, we have Sinnott over Sanders. And we do have him back to back still. But Sinnott's interesting enough on his profile that, you know, we put him up there. I mean, all these guys behind Bowers are still pretty much kind of a dart throw,
Yes.
on these rookie tight ends. More so in Dynasty, I probably look to target them and take a chance because you can wait, then redraft necessarily. I mean, last year, though, we saw these tight ends put up such a big score. So I think people really want to find the next Laporta and things like that, and then we had Trey McBride going so late, guys like that. I don't know if these guys profile like that for, coming on this year, but we'll see. But I definitely still take them as late as they're going, because you can get them pretty late. I mean, still, even in tight end premium, near the last rounds.
I mean, you're looking at in the Never Too Early Best Ball tournament, there are 4 tight ends being drafted, I believe. Nope, I take that back. 5, 6. I promise you it's no more than 6. But Brock Bowers was going in the mid-5th. Then you could get Jatavian Sanders in the 16th. You could get Ben Sinnott in the 18th. Theo Johnson was a 19th round pick. And then Cade Stover and Jaheim Bell out of Florida State, they're both 20th round picks. You are right. I mean, this is the definition of dart throws, where the number 2 rookie tight end in redraft is not going until damn near the 17th round of these best ball tournaments. Here's what I want to do. I want to save the Keon Coleman discussion. I want to save the Ricky Pearsall discussion. And I want to get in, if there's time, I want to get into Jackson Smith and Jigba in the next segment. We may or may not have time to get to that. But before we close out this one, you are a Cowboys fan, right, Steph?
Unfortunately.
Now, you say unfortunately, it's America's team. There's nothing to be ashamed about with the Cowboys. They are a fantastic football team. There's fantastic fantasy players there in CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson. But the guy I really want to ask you about is Dak Prescott. The way I want to frame this is, we know that for whatever reason, Jerry Jones is not inking him to a long-term deal, and we do know that Prescott's price goes up every day until he signs that deal. For fantasy purposes, if Dak Prescott goes into the 2024 season without a new deal, is this making him go up your board, down your board, stay the same? How do you feel about Prescott if he doesn't get this deal before the start of the season?
I mean, I'm not going to move him. I don't think he's going to sit. I think Dak will still bet on himself. So I think he's still going to play out the season. Regardless, I have no idea what Jerry is thinking, though. It's made no sense. I mean, that's more what, I laugh at being a Cowboys fan. It's always maddening. It's like, it's so illogical sometimes the way they run. He needs a GM so bad. It's like, whatever he does, the price is going to go up. Mm-hmm. I mean, and most of the time he's caped. Last time when he didn't pay Dak, he had that injury, and then he still paid him. I mean, Dak's going in to hit free agency, if he goes in without this extension in 2025. I mean, we saw what, Kirk Cousins got, again, coming off of that injury. I mean, Dak is, regardless what you think of Dak, he is a top 10 NFL quarterback in this league. It's not going to be like people like, oh, Justin Fields didn't get, no, I mean, he's not on that level. Dak is a proven quarterback. Some team is going to pay for him, and they're going to get into a bidding war. He's going to get his money from somebody, whether it's the Cowboys or somebody else. And I mean, the Cowboys have nothing. Even Trey Lance right now isn't going to be on the roster for 2025. And assuming, this draft class isn't going to be that great. Next year, we're looking at quarterbacks this year. So unless there's, he okays it because he's got a no trade clause, to be traded and something really crazy happened and they got a quarterback. But I really don't see that happening. I mean, Jerry talks about all the time he's getting older and things. I mean, the team is set up to win now. We only have Cooks for one more year. And then, Gallup's gone. We got CeeDee, who we also have to sign, but it doesn't make sense to really get his deal done until that. Right. We have a quarterback throwing to him. We still have Parsons in the wind. He's probably third on the list for extensions in order. But Dak here, I mean, Dak was great last year. He was the number 3 receiver on PFF grade. He had the most, he had 39 touchdowns last year, the most in the league. And his interceptions were not that much. I know everybody likes to always say that, but I mean, I have also some pretty big memories of Josh Allen throwing some interceptions in the end zone, and people don't seem to give him the same crap. And, all this, yeah, it's frustrating when we see them like have these playoff games and leave early, but they're getting to the playoffs. Like, how many teams actually are making it to the Super Bowl? If that's your standard for if you should extend a quarterback, then like the only quarterbacks that should be paid is Patrick Mahomes. I mean, come on. Like, it makes no sense. Like, people always say, like, you have, a bullseye on you just for wearing the star in your helmet, which is true. It's like you're under this microscope and held to these standards that nobody else is. And I mean, also, I think a lot of it is just sometimes our coach, I don't know how well he did better than I thought. Like, he finally figured out it's a good idea to throw CeeDee Lamb the ball. Look what happens. But it took him a while to figure that out, that you should target consistently your number one wide receiver. But he's not the most creative. We don't put him in the same conversation as we do, like, McVay and Shanahan, people like that. It's not like this offensive genius system. So sometimes I think, maybe some people figure us out. And I always, it may not all be Dak's fault. Like, because when we look at the raw numbers, he exceeds everywhere. I mean, he was in the MVP conversation last year. People forget, and it's like one game, that's all out the window. So I'm still in on him. I think he's still going to put up the numbers. CeeDee's still there. I think that CeeDee's going to be fine and back, hopefully. But I mean, I do think there's a good chance that at this point they may not get his deal done for Dak, because, I mean, I don't know what else. It made more sense to have gotten it done before free agency to free up some money.
Correct.
To have actually bought something. So I don't know what they're doing, but it's going to, like I said, all I do know is it's going to cost more money every day. But at this point,
quarterback 8 is
I've given up.
Yeah. Historical anomalies saying in the YouTube chat. Cowboys are a touchy subject with stuff. And yes, it clearly is. Dak Prescott, quarterback 8 in the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament at 708 right now. That's what you're looking at. And people are still buying in. I'm not concerned with a holdout. And if he doesn't go into this season with a contract, maybe he puts up another Boffo season. You never know. I don't think CeeDee Lamb could have done much better. Prescott, I don't know if he could have done much better, but maybe it's another big year for Dak Prescott this year as well. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the polarizing rookies, and we're going to lead off with 2 players we did get a chance to talk about in this segment. We're talking Ricky Pearsall from Florida. We're talking Keon Coleman from Florida State. She's Steph Miller from Legendary Upside and Ship Chasing. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show exclusively on the Better Sports Network.
If you're not playing dynasty fantasy football right now, where we're still out there doing all sorts of trades and moves, everybody else that does like casual gamers that do redraft, they're done, and they're just kind of speculating or like talking about the draft. We're still playing. Like, if you play dynasty, we play all year. I play over at FFPC. If you want to play there, use promo code COOP, COOP. We'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more at myffpc.com. And there's 2 ways to jump in over there. You can either do a startup, in which case you can get Dalton Kincaid way after guys like Sam Laporta and Trey McBride. Brock Bowers, I just saw that the rookie Brock Bowers, even before the draft, they're projecting him to go as like the tight end 2 in these startup drafts. Crazy, right? Like right after Laporta, which is nuts. Like, you can get Kincaid, or if you don't want to do a startup, I think this is even more fun. You go out and take over an orphan team, right? So over at FFPC, they never close the leagues down. They just take the teams and if somebody has to leave or whatever, then you can buy in and take that team. So you can go find a team that has Kincaid and a bunch of players you like, and you keep those players, and then you look at all the other players you don't like, and you have the golden opportunity to trade them away. Like, it's so much fun to take a team and be like, okay, you know what? Because if you do a startup, you love all the guys already. Like, those are your babies. If you do an orphan team, then you can trade away all the guys you don't like, and that's even more fun, honestly. You have the golden, the green light there. So go to myffpc.com, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more, and you'll give you a leg up versus starting your own league. Now you got to chase people down for dues. You got to pay your own money. So go get set up over there. Empire Leagues have arrived at the FFPC. FFPC Empire Dynasty Leagues are
Dynasty leagues with a large progressive prize pool that grows yearly and is only awarded once there is a back-to-back winner. When that happens, the back-to-back champion wins the prize pool for that year, and the Empire prize pool and the league is disbanded, and leagues, the team owners will get their deposits back so they can join another Empire league or another Dynasty league. Sound awesome? Yeah, I think so too. Go to myffpc.com and play in an Empire league today. Steph Miller from Legendary Upside is my guest tonight here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. I'm Eric Balkman in for hour number 2 tonight. Steph Miller 57 is where to follow her on the X. You can watch her on the Ship Chasing podcast from time to time as well. I want to lead things off with a receiver. Ricky Pearsall here is a player. There's not going to be another Puka Nacua this year. I think that's clear. Nobody's going to go from a day 3 pick to being one of the best rookie wide receivers we've ever seen. However, when I've heard this question asked of many pundits out there, who this year's Puka Nacua could be, I keep hearing Ricky Pearsall's name. Now, Pearsall is going to go higher in the draft than Puka Nacua. Where do you stand on a guy like Pearsall in such a deep wide receiver class? Is he going to be a hit in fantasy football leagues this year, Steph?
I hope so. I have a lot of Ricky Pearsall. I really like him. I mean, he's a little bit of an older guy. Profiles mostly as a slot, but he did have some downfield production. He's really good in the intermediate area, and he's got great hands. He was also he was really efficient, and like I said, he killed the combine. He's super athletic. So I'm pretty excited about him. I mean, I think that there's definitely some upside there, and it seems like the teams are really in on him. He posted pretty solid yards per route run numbers. He had, 2 really solid years at Florida there with 2.41 and 2.23 for his yards per route run. He never hit really that 30% dominator rating that we want to see, but like I said, he was still productive. And he's kind of, like, I want to say kind of similar to like Jaden Reed. Is a big comparison I've seen some people make. Jaden Reed had a little bit more of a deeper ball profile. Like I said, Pearsall's a little bit better in the intermediate area, but they're also really big on him over at reception perception, and he is a really good at separating, which is something we want to see with these wide receivers.
Yeah,
in these areas.
I think the other thing to keep in mind with Pearsall is in another draft, like take for instance last year's draft class, he's not going off the board. I'm looking at the mock draft database right now and where he's ranked by everybody sort of everybody else in the draftnik industry. He's 11th. Last year, there's no way he would have been the 11th receiver. He might have been all the way up to like a late first-round pick, maybe early second-round pick. Now, he could still go in the second round this year. In fact, I think he's probably going to go somewhere in the mid-second round. But Pearsall's a really interesting guy that I know I wasn't paying attention to 2 months ago, but I'm definitely paying attention to now. A guy who is expected to maybe go a little bit before him, maybe right around where he's going, in the NFL draft come Thursday night or maybe Friday. Keon Coleman out of Florida State, a player that I was talking with one of my cohorts at the FFPC during the college football season, and this has happened to be after Coleman had strung a couple of really good games together, and he said, hey, is Keon Coleman the wide receiver 2 for rookies this year? And I said, well, and like Steve Harvey would say, slow your roll, player. I don't know if I would have him that high. And clearly he's not that high. I mean, Neighbors, Odunze, both head and shoulders above him. I like Thomas ahead of him. I like Ladd McConkey quite a bit too ahead of Keon Coleman. But Keon Coleman, once he gets to the pros, there are some concerns. There are some red flags. Are they warranted, Steph? How do you see Keon Coleman at the next level?
I do think they're warranted. I mean, he can't separate, and that's a big deal. I mean, that's what we've seen, and we see he's mostly getting it done on like contested catch rate and stuff like that. He's not super. He doesn't have the best like lateral agility and things. He's explosive and he's strong, but
former basketball player.
Yeah, he can jump, but there's some other concerns, and he didn't have the speed either that we wanted to see.
Right. Yep. That's another thing.
Big one. So there's a lot of red flags. I mean, with his production, he had, he never really got there. I mean, he was actually outproduced by Wilson, who could be, oh my gosh, I'm having a later guy, Johnny Wilson, who could go later.
Yeah, what's he going to be drafted as, a wide receiver or an offensive tackle?
No.
Because that,
or tight end.
Yeah, or tight end. I mean, that guy. I'm in Wisconsin, but I'm a big Florida State fan, and I watched those guys last year. And Johnny Wilson, it looked like a man amongst boys every single time that he was out there. But he was not. You want to talk about separation? Wilson didn't get a whole lot of separation either. But when you're a behemoth like him, you just threw it near him, and he was probably going to come down with it or catch it because he had such a massive target radius.
Yeah, and the other thing about Coleman is he didn't have the best yak that we would have expected either. So like even after the catch, it's like he wasn't doing that great. So there's a lot of red flags. I mean, it's very obvious what he is, what his role would be. And then, the next level in the NFL, just as, that big guy. But I mean, there's a lot of questions. I mean, when we see that type of profile, it makes me think, is this Quentin Johnson all over again type thing, situation. So
maybe the Chargers will get him in the second round and really make.
I've seen it mocked before a few places, so who knows? I mean, I've seen him go a lot of places. We'll see. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, like we could talk about Neighbors and Harrison and Odunze. Well, we kind of have a general idea of the handful of teams that are going to be drafting them. Guy like Coleman could go in the second round. We don't know. I mean, and there's a lot of teams that could come up and get him if they wanted to. Let's shift back to rookie running backs here, Steph. I want to lead things off with MarShawn Lloyd. I want to make sure we hit on him. So Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros is probably the biggest MarShawn Lloyd fan that I know. He keeps pumping him up, telling me that he's going to be the number one running back in this class. He's going to be awesome. And I think there are certain things to like about MarShawn Lloyd. Number one running back, I'm not so sure about that. I don't see it the same way. You could make a case that maybe 5 or 6 guys should be above him. You could also make the case that maybe only one guy should be above him, maybe no guys in Debro's case. So MarShawn Lloyd right now projected as a 3rd round pick in the NFL draft. Does that seem right for you? How do you stand on, or where do you stand on MarShawn Lloyd once he gets into the NFL? Because I would imagine he's probably going to be part of a committee to kick off his career, but maybe he could develop into being that 1A on a pretty good team.
Possibly. I'm not as high as some people. I've heard some of the pro cases. He has some good receiving efficiency. He was pretty solid, but he wasn't that great of a runner, honestly. And we'll see. But his speed was really impressive, and especially for his size when he tested out at the combine. But he was a lot of it was just like his consistency, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of like had some trouble bouncing his runs to the outside, and he did good when like everything went perfect, but then when it didn't, it's like it kind of all just fell apart. He wasn't that efficient on the per touch basis and things. He scored only like at the 37th percentile mark in elusiveness and in breakaway as well, which kind of go hand in hand there. Yeah. But his dominator rating was okay. He did pretty good there. He transferred, we've seen him at a couple places produce, and size so he could be the type of back I think that like a lot of coaches like. He can do everything. Mm-hmm. I think he might get in good, so we could see that opportunity. We'll just have to kind of see like what happens. Like you say, I think he still might have a committee role. I don't see him as a workhorse type, which limits his ceiling quite a bit. And he kind of has some wasted movement there too. He kind of runs a little bit like Pacheco.
13 catches last year for Lloyd, which I don't necessarily put all on Lloyd because Caleb Williams is an underrated runner. And a lot of times, if you have a mobile quarterback, doesn't necessarily have to dump off to the running back because he can kind of take care of it himself. But Lloyd is an interesting guy. And also as interesting, or maybe more interesting, is Braelon Allen out of Wisconsin, who is, I think a lot of people were really, really excited for this guy when he hit the scene as a 17-year-old freshman in the Big Ten, and he was putting up numbers and he was bolting over linebackers. I mean, the guy, Braelon Allen, is not a small man. I mean, you're looking at what, 6'2", 6'3", 235, 240, 245 pounds, whatever it is. And this was at 17 that he was doing this. He never, I mean, the numbers did get better. And obviously with Luke Fickell taking over last year, he hires Phil Longo from North Carolina to input an air raid offense. And Braelon Allen did show he was capable of catching the ball. However, his numbers weren't all that great. After when he tested at the combine, didn't do everything at the combine, tested at his pro day. His pro day numbers were, I don't want to say they were meh, but they were kind of like, I was hoping for better. Yeah. Braelon Allen is an interesting cat when you look at where he could go this year. Right now, I think you're looking at him as a third, maybe a fourth round pick, maybe an early fourth round pick. Braelon Allen at the next level, is he a guy that we should be looking at for fantasy purposes? Does his game translate? Because he's certainly got the size, Steph, but does his game translate into a player that we want to be drafting, or is he A.J. Dillon 2.0?
Yeah, I mean, I was with you. He was super young, so it's like he still has a lot of room to grow, and he's big. And it's like a lot of teams are going to like him. And then we saw those testing numbers, and like you say, at his pro day, and then the fact that he didn't want to even like do his second attempt on things. Well, it was I'm okay. So it's not like, I could have done better. It's like,
right.
Let's just keep it there.
The thing that irritates me about Allen, and not about him specifically, but he was the type of guy that I expected to blow the combine out of the water. Like I expected, these drills, these agility things, and these things that measure athleticism. This is the kind of stuff that he should have crushed. And not only did he not crush them, he was just kind of average in them. And I think that's a big red flag for me.
I mean, he was really bad. Like his jumps were horrible.
Yeah.
Like his agility was like, they couldn't give him a raw score. Like he didn't enough testing for it to qualify for some reason. But I mean, he's got a strong rushing resume and stuff like we've talked about. He's big. He was he had decent efficiency, young and stuff. So, but a lot of what I'm mostly concerned with is now if he's falling, what his capital is going to be and how a team's going to view him. So, yes. I mean, that'll be the big thing of telling. Because, because
if he's
going on day 3, then yeah.
I mean, like, if the Cowboys, for instance, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the next segment, but if they were to somehow ignore running back on day 2, and if Braelon Allen, if they go up and grab him on day 4, okay, well then we can have a conversation. It's still not as good as being drafted in round 2 or round 3 for draft capital. But if he's the first guy they take, then that's something. But I think that scenario is unlikely, and I think it's also even more unlikely for just about any other team, maybe outside of, the Cardinals or the Chargers or something like that. Historical anomalies. Yes, I am a Badgers fan. I root for the Wisconsin Badgers as well. And in all sports, baseball, basketball, football, whatever. Not baseball. They don't have a baseball team. Anyway, and thank God, because if they had a baseball team, they really wouldn't have any money to pay for anybody because they'd have to disperse it to the baseball team as well. That's a different topic. Will Shipley is our next topic that we're going to be talking about here, Steph. He was a guy who played at Clemson, put up some pretty good numbers there for the Tigers. And again, a player that is not being ballyhooed as a day 1 or day 2 pick. He's probably going to be selected, maybe along with Braelon Allen, maybe in that Ray Davis area early on day 3. But I've heard a lot of people I respect talk about him, saying that his pass catching chops, the fact that he's on the field all the time for Clemson, the fact that he can do everything, he's a versatile player, this actually should make him more valuable to whatever team drafts him. And if he's on the field more, that makes him more valuable to us as fantasy players as well. Do you have any strong feelings either way on Will Shipley this year?
I've taken some late round shots, but he's not like one of, I would say, my guys, necessarily. Like you say, like he showed some stuff, he's quick, he's got some versatility. I think a lot of his is scheme specific. He did really good with zone running. So it will kind of depend, again, where he lands and whose system he gets in and what the opportunities look like to move up the depth chart, and then I'm going to say that about any of these later guys.
Right.
Just because that's the truth. I mean, with running back, landing spot, I think matters even more than wide receiver and stuff, and who has a more wide open depth chart where there's rules to be had. But, he was a good receiver. Things like, so we'll see. And,
and he did it at a high level too.
Yeah, he did.
You know what I mean? And so I think that this is not like, with all due respect, this is not somebody from South Dakota State or, UTEP or something like that, which I know there's talented players that come from those schools, but he was at Clemson. This is, as close to a blue blood as you can come in college football. And he was doing it at that level. Shifting to receivers here. And I want to go back to LSU. Brian Thomas Jr. played opposite of Malik Neighbors. And in regards to how good he's going to be, we have to take into account, number one, that he may not be the most polished receiver. We have to take into account that he had a really talented quarterback throwing to him the last 2 years, including this past year when his quarterback won the Heisman. And he was playing opposite Malik Neighbors, who set LSU receiving records. And you think about the receiving records, some of the receivers that have come through there recently with Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, so on and so forth. That is impressive stuff. Is Brian Thomas Jr. Just in the right spot at the right time, and that's what's making him look good? Or does he do some things on the field, Steph, that makes you think like, okay, this guy can win in the pros? Final question, is he your number 4 receiver in this year's class?
He is my number 4 receiver. I'll start there. But there's a lot of questions, like you say. I mean, I do think there's a case to be made that, this was a great offense, propped him up. I mean, a lot of his stuff was also propped up by just touchdowns, which is not a bad thing. I mean, scoring touchdowns, that's great. And his athleticism is off the charts, but, some of the other stuff isn't necessarily there. So for where he's going, it's a lot. But the upside's there. So it's kind of like one of those things like, I don't know if I want to be all the way in, but I definitely don't want to be all the way out.
Yeah.
Especially if he goes somewhere like, the Bills or things like that. It's like, I want to be really in those type of scenarios.
And if the thing is, Thomas Jr. could go in a spot where he could be like a future number one, like he could be drafted to be a future number 1, maybe not in 2024, but for sure in 2025. I think that's what makes him so compelling. The last specific wide receiver I want to get to here in this segment is Malachi Corley. Malachi Corley is a player that I did not know much about in January, February. And then, you start watching film, you start reading what other people are saying and scouts are saying about him. And I'm kind of like, God, this guy should probably be going a little bit higher than he is. 5'11", 210, 79 catches, 984 yards, 11 touchdowns on 113 targets over 12 games in his final year with Western Kentucky. That was his second best year. In 2022, he caught 101 balls on 142 targets, almost 1,300 yards. He gets into the end zone 11 times again that year as well. Malachi Corley right now, as I look at what a lot of the pundits are saying as far as receivers going and where he's going to go in the draft, he's probably not going to be taken until that end of round 2, start of round 3 range. And obviously, we'd much rather see him go end of round 2 to a team like Buffalo or Kansas City or something like that than at the top of round 3 to maybe a team that doesn't have a proven quarterback. I'm pretty excited about this player. I know that the size isn't exactly, it's not the most traditional thing you want to see, but I feel like the NFL is shifting to maybe having more shifty wide receivers than the whole size aspect being the most advantageous thing to have. How do you feel about Malachi Corley? Because the more I read about him, the more I'm liking.
He's another one I hadn't totally got. I know some people are really into him. I'm not out, but I didn't totally get in like overboard on the bandwagon. I mean, a lot of it that I've seen, like some of the biggest knocks are just he doesn't have a really diverse route tree. Mm-hmm. But I know he's really the yak monster there. So it's kind of, how you're looking at, he was productive. He didn't really totally break out until a little later, but we'll see.
And he did play 4 years of college. He could have come back for his 5th year. He's deciding to end. So that's obviously good. I will say, and I'm trying to, so his big season was 2022, which would have been his junior year. So that's kind of what you like to see. You're right. I mean, his sophomore year, 73 catches, 700 yards, 7 touchdowns. I mean, that's fine. 6.7 yards per target. It doesn't wow you. And then the other thing to consider is the competition level at Western Kentucky. It's not like he's going up against Alabama and Georgia every single week. He's going up against everybody that the Hilltoppers are playing. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind as well. But you sprinkled them throughout. You got them in a few drafts. I do want to know, as far as all the drafts you've done so far, do you have a favorite sleeper running back? Is there a player that, you keep coming back to? You're like, I probably shouldn't be this overweight on a player prior to the NFL draft, but I really like this guy's game. I think no matter where he ends up, there's something to like about this player here. I have him on a lot of drafts. Is there a rookie running back that you have at this point in your draft stuff that you're really liking what you're seeing?
Yeah, I'm not sure how deep we're talking. So I went pretty deep. Dylan Laub.
Oh yeah, sure.
From New Hampshire, I really, really like. He's not the biggest guy. He's 5'10", 208, but he can catch. And, that's in fantasy, we love a receiving upside. And, he had tons of production. Obviously, again, we're talking about not necessarily the best competition. So, you got to take things with a grain of salt. He's an older prospect as well. But a lot of the things that he does well, he was really efficient and he was a workhorse. And those are things we want to look for in those later rounds if we're going to take a shot on a guy. He had a 94% backfield dominator rating in 2022 and an 82% mark last year. And overall for his career was 86%. So that is really good. He was really efficient as a receiver. Also, he had a career 1.81 yards per route run. So, he's somebody I'm really excited about. Now, I think as a specialized receiving weapon, he could have a role in an offense right away if he lands in the right spot.
Yeah, Laub, what's interesting about him, 2022, he went from 1,200 yards on 240 carries to 715 yards on just 158 carries. So you're looking at 500 less rushing yards, but he also saw 100 less carries or 85 less carries. But his receptions went 49 for 464, just 2 touchdowns, to 68 catches to 699 yards and 7 touchdowns. This is college. This is not the pros. Dude is catching 68 balls out of the backfield. This is something we need to be paying attention to for fantasy. And obviously, when you're talking about late round best ball guys, when you're talking about late round 2, round 3 running backs in your rookie draft, Dylan Laub is a guy that we need to be paying attention to. Might not get chosen until the 6th round, but that may not make a difference because, as you said, he's demonstrated that he has the chops to play right away, whatever team drafts him. Same question, Steph, but let's do receiver here. So this is a deeper draft, obviously, for receivers. You look at, how many receivers could go in the first 3 rounds? 12, 13, it could be even more than that for all I know. So I don't know if that makes it easier or more difficult to find a favorite sleeper as far as deep wide receivers go. You can go as deep as you want on this. Who's your favorite?
The guy I went with for this is Javon Baker. So not super, super deep, but he's 22. He's 3-year player, 6'1", 208. And, I think we could see him, he could end up playing X or Z in the NFL. He has a fantastic vertical profile. He was really good against press coverage. He was really good against zone. He was good against, he did everything well. Yes. He had the best success rate versus press of any wide receiver in the class other than Rome Odunze, which pretty damn good.
Yeah, you're in good company there. Javon Baker, I was going to say, I talked up how I keep hearing more and more about Malachi Corley. Javon Baker is another guy that I keep hearing more and more about, people excited about to seeing where he lands, who gets his services after the NFL draft. Probably going to be, I would imagine, a third-round pick, maybe fourth, but I think he sticks on day 2 somewhere. He's going to go. Very excited for Javon Baker as a pro. 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns on 52 catches last year. Incredible 21.9 yards per catch. We are coming into the home stretch right now. We're going to take our final break. When we come back, Steph Miller from Legendary Upside and I are going to discuss some of the more interesting landing spots that could be fantasy gold or fantasy fool's gold. Cincinnati running back situation, Arizona running back, Carolina running back, Bills wide receiver, Patriots wide receiver. I think this is fascinating stuff. We'll hit on as many as we can. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with Eric Balkman and Stephanie Miller right here on the Better Sports Network.
The thing with Dynasty is that it's so hard to get a good league going. Like, it's very difficult to get all these friends that are going to be paying attention, or they're going to stick with it, and they're not going to say, "Oh, I don't want to play anymore. My team stinks. Find somebody else next year." Like, and then you're collecting dues, and then you're getting in arguments, and you're arguing with people on Twitter about dues. Like, we've seen too much of that going on. So it's very difficult. And what happens is you find like 5 or 6 good people that want to play, and then you don't have enough people, and you fill the league with a bunch of weirdos. So what I like doing, honestly, at this stage is if I'm going to play Dynasty, I want to play on a nice, clean, serious, professional site, and I go to FFPC to play, right? FFPC has never had a league fold. Eric Balkman over there told me that. He's like, if somebody has to leave a league, we just fill it. So your option is you can go and do a startup, and like Jack said in the chat, you start it, and then you go and you figure out who you're going to take from the top down. And if you want to do like a long rebuild, or a long-term team, or if you want to try and win right away and get a bunch of vets, you can do that. Or you can adopt an orphan team, and with that you go out and somebody quit, and that's so much fun, because then you take their team and you have all these guys that you like, but then you have all of these guys that they had that you don't like, and that's actually way more fun, because then you can trade all those guys, and it's so much fun to trade. Like, when I go to orphan teams, I used to say, "Oh, I'm not going to take this team because all the players, I don't like them. I only want players I do like." But I've realized that it's actually more fun to take the teams that have a couple guys you really like and a couple guys that everyone else likes that you don't like, and then trade them. Like, go and grab an orphan team like Gabe Davis and then trade into some Gabe Davis guy. So go do that now. Use you can use the QR code here, or a link in the description, or go to myffpc.com. Just make sure you use promo code COOP when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more. And that's another thing. When you make a league with your friends, Coop isn't giving you $25, right? You have to pay the full dues. This time you get a little discount. So yeah, go over there. And also, for you maniacs out there, they do have high stakes leagues. So these leagues, if you want, you can go big time. I know some of the redraft leagues. We announced on this channel a redraft league that 10K buy-in. I'm not sure the dynasty ones go that high, but they go into the thousands. So if you want to take this real seriously and get crazy with it, do it. That's the place to do it. myffpc.com, promo code COOP, baby. Go get set up.
21 minutes until the top of the hour. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Eric Balkman from the FFPC and Stephanie Miller from Legendary Upside and Chip Chasing joining you tonight. I want to tell you a little bit about the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription, which you can unlock all content for all sports, including annual draft guides. When you get it now, you're going to get one-on-one expert access in the Discord. You'll be able to sync up your league so you can analyze matchups and trends in your specific leagues. The lineup generator is integrated with Fanjections. You're going to get daily rankings, weekly rankings, the value vault, position coaches on there, waiver wire, ownership percentages, projection stats and tools. Build better lineups guaranteed. Get access to everything Fantasy Alarm offers all year long. Use promo code LOCK at fantasyalarm.com/lock. That's LOCK, fantasyalarm.com/lock. Steph, when you are drafting your best ball teams, and you're drafting players that, not necessarily rookies that don't have homes, but you're drafting, and we'll kick things off with our discussion here about Cincinnati and their backfield. When you're drafting a player like Chase Brown or Zach Moss, I mean, is it in the back of your head like, okay, I might be overpaying here because Cincinnati could draft a guy on day 2, and all of a sudden, regardless of how that day 2 pick works out, him specifically, it's going to hurt Moss. It's going to Chase Brown. It's going to hurt Chase Brown. Do you ever think about how close to the front of your mind is stuff like that for the Bengals backfield specifically?
I mean, it's pretty close. I mean, like you say, because when it goes from a 2 to 3 man backfield, that's a big difference in fantasy. So I have, like myself, I did start backing off of them. I think Chase Brown's price, like as their prices started kind of rising a little bit, and then I drafted a little bit more earlier, and then I kind of laid off. But I think, that's true in general, just overarching for running backs. Especially before the draft, it's like that's one, but part of it is that's why we're getting the prices we are on these guys. If we knew that, they were going to get, stay a 2-man backfield in places, then they'd probably be going earlier. But at the same time, people will still double count it, whatever happens. They're still going to react. So it's, kind of like figuring out where you think is the right price for the situation still. Or just, like I said, diversifying and taking a shot and going, okay, I may not get it right every time, but
that's
some of the times.
I mean, if you're volume drafting, you have to. Like that's the way that you play it. Zach Moss, this is really juicy right now. So I think according to the FFPC, you're looking at the high stakes players believing that the Bengals is a pretty lucrative spot for a rookie running back. Zach Moss, running back 32 at the 906. Chase Brown, running back 37 at the 1008. So with that, you're not having a starting running back drafted until the mid-9th round. This is awesome for a potential landing spot for the Bengals. And then you also get to play next to Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and perhaps T. Higgins for a year or maybe longer. Maybe they get Bowers in the first round too, that there's a non-zero chance of that. That'd be insane if that were to happen.
That's the dream.
Well, what's the dream for your Cowboys and their running back? What do you want to see them do in the draft? Because right now, Deuce Vaughn, Rico Dowdle, and who was the other cat that they got?
Royce Freeman.
Yeah, that's right. Clearly the leading fantasy scorer in the backfield for the Cowboys, not on the roster yet. What do you want to see them do? And what do you think they're going to do?
Well, for once, I'm trying to temper my expectations, but I think there's a good chance that Jerry is reading my mind here, and we are one, because my number 1 running back that we talked about earlier is Jonathon Brooks. And, Jonathon Brooks has gotten some connections to the Cowboys, and I think it's a real possibility. Also, we talked about his ACL. I don't know how aware everyone is, but I've been talking about this for a while. So anybody in Discords with me is probably sick of me saying this, but Dr. Kenneth Cooper, the team doctor for the Cowboys, is the same doctor who did his surgery. So if he's getting some good prognosis of some things going on, it seems like they would be the team, and they've done, they've overlooked some medical stuff in the past and, for the right things in it. If we were talking earlier, a player that maybe was a first-round pick going in the second, and the Cowboys need, and they want to do something splashy. It seems like the right, that type of play that they think they're getting a value, because Jerry has to get a deal out of things. It makes a lot of sense. So I think it'd be cool to see. The only thing I would slightly can be concerned about maybe is right away, is he ready out of the gate, and what else? I was hoping that they would maybe have a better veteran as, a bridge there than Royce Freeman that they signed or something. But hopefully he's ready, or, close enough, or that they can still do some sort of rotation to be okay until that point.
Stay in the same division. Devin Singletary. This is fascinating to me. The top drafted fantasy player in fantasy drafts for the New York Giants is Devin Singletary. And you say, Balky, there's no way that could be accurate. And I say, yes, that is. In the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, no Giant, on average, was being selected until the 10:06, the middle of the 10th round. And it just happened to be Devin Singletary, who was the 35th running back off the board. After that, No other Giants running backs were selected. I feel like nobody's talking a whole lot about the Giants landing spot here. I think it's because we like rookies and we want to see them do well. And we saw what Saquon Barkley did the last few years behind that offensive line in New York. And obviously their perimeter players leave a little bit to be desired. So you can load up the box against them. How juicy is the Giants running back situation for a landing spot for a rookie right now, Steph?
Well, part of it is, do they fix the offensive line? And is there anything to not have a stacked 8-man box every time,
right,
against them? So, I mean, but it's wide open. And I want to think that Dable is, decent at scheming and that we can figure out something going on here. I made the mistake last year of thinking that the Giants were all so underpriced and loading up on them as late round picks. It turned out, no, they were correctly priced. None of them did anything, but I had Slayton on every team and, a lot of Hyatt and Wandale and things. And I'll take some of those shot on some of those guys, but not as much. But this could be a spot. Maybe Trey Benson lands would be interesting to see, as another guy that I definitely think that they are in that tier above. Because, we want somebody that they need somebody that could pretty much be a workhorse, I think, in this role, or has a shot at being a third round back.
Just be a
something.
Weapon.
There has to be something with
do something. Yes, exactly. Which Trey Benson would fit the bill in New York.
Because Brooks is already on the Cowboys, so that's the best next option.
What about the Cardinals? James Conner was awesome last year. I don't expect him to have that type of season again this year. He's getting a little long in the tooth as far as running backs go. The Cardinals running back situation is an interesting one because you're going to have a full year of Kyler Murray, at least if we were to believe what everything's going on that with Monty Ossenford, I believe is the GM there. If what he's saying is to be believed, probably going to be Kyler Murray all season, probably going to be Marvin Harrison. They got Trey McBride. They just don't have that elite running back that can grow with these young playmakers here. The Cardinals running back situation, if a guy like, Trey Benson were to go there, or, a guy like maybe not necessarily Braelon Allen, but, a player like Jalen Wright or MarShawn Lloyd we were talking about earlier, that's kind of a desirable spot to be going right now for fantasy, right?
Oh, yeah. That's like you said, James Conner has not stayed healthy for long. He's good when he's healthy, and he's getting older. Like, he's not going to last. And some of those guys were on my list as well. I think I like Jalen Wright a lot. That's a guy I think would be really interesting there. Possibly even like Blake Corum is another one that could make a lot of sense in that offense. Playing behind there, depends on how early they take a running back. We've talked about there's some guys later they could look at. I was more interested earlier on in the season in like Audric Estime, but he's got some good size to him still. He performed pretty well against like stacked boxes and things. Like, he had some interesting numbers. Then, the combine was less than ideal and he kind of fell out of favor a little bit, but I don't know. And then another older back that kind of just does a little bit of everything really good that I've looked at is Ray Davis.
Yep.
Can make some sense.
Hollywood Next just popping into the YouTube. How about Ray Davis? Well, Steph just told you that's another guy in Arizona for sure. Carolina, their backfield, is that sneaky, or is that like just you don't want to be a part of that backfield going forward? Because I don't think they really have. They have some pieces there. I don't think they're sold on any of them as a long-term solution. But the Carolina running back situation, Bryce Young, the Panthers, they got to be better in year two. They're probably going to get him some more weapons in the draft. How sneaky good, or sneaky, maybe not even sneaky good, is the Panthers running back situation in that scenario? Is that sneaky good or obviously bad?
I think it's a promising chance at a role.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like you say, I don't know how good the offense is going to be. So I don't want to, my number one thing isn't always to take a running back on offenses we think are bad. Usually we want to take running backs on offenses we think are good. But there's not, as far as like you're looking at depth charts, it's definitely there. Obviously, Miles Sanders isn't what they wanted. They had Chuba play, as the, kind of took that job over. But neither one of them are, like you say, lighting the world on fire. And it'd be easy to carve out a role and push one of them out. So I do think there's a chance that somebody could come in and be the guy, or, it to even just be a 2-man backfield or something. But but they need a lot. So, it's hard for me to see them necessarily spending an earlier round pick on a running back instead of a wide receiver, So we may be looking at just a little bit of a later guy there and somebody that can just be a 3-way committee type thing, So that's kind of the downside of it. But a couple other guys, that could be interesting. They're kind of also pass catching backs that people have talked about. Rashina Lee out of Marshall and Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue could be some guys that would make a little bit of sense there in that type of role.
Tracy's another guy that people are just, he's really flying up for it.
Crazy for right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Shifting to wide receivers. This is what I teased at the top of the show. New England does not have a quarterback at the moment. They're probably going to get a quarterback with their 3rd overall pick. And we listed off all the also-rans, has-beens, never-wases for the Patriots pass catchers. If they end up taking a receiver early in the 2nd round, and we already established throughout this broadcast, there will be good receivers to be taking in the 2nd round of the draft. All of a sudden, I think that's really lucrative for whatever player is going to be picked there by the Patriots. All of a sudden, you're not fighting off heavy competition. You're not fighting off, I'm trying to think of a good example, Keenan Allen. You're not fighting off, Trey McBride. You're not fighting off. You're fighting off easily beatable players. That's who New England has on this roster right now. So the New England Patriots wide receiver spot, is that lucrative, or am I reading too much into this because he's still going to have a rookie quarterback?
Well, who's the quarterback? Who's calling the plays? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of questions. They were pretty bad last year, but like you say, it's wide open. Hopefully that they're not going to just rotate, because they have so many guys that are like literally the same thing. And
yes,
I'm like, you have a type, huh? But a few things that could make Keon Coleman could make sense there, I think, in the 2nd round. Roman Wilson could make some sense. If maybe like Adonai Mitchell fell, he could make some sense. Those, guys that could be there for like round 2, possibly. Troy Franklin, I think they had him for a top 30 visit as well. So we'll see, but Troy Franklin could be going earlier than that. It just depends. We don't know how things are going to play out. That's the glory of this. It's like there's so many questions on who's going to actually go the 1st round, the 2nd round, and it's pretty wide open and so deep.
It's why we tune in. It's why we watch, obviously, right? How do you? Troy Franklin's a guy I've gone back and forth on. Did you just kind of sprinkle him throughout your best ball draft so far this year?
I was really heavy on him early on, and then when he weighed in at the combine and ran not quite as fast as we wanted, I kind of laid off. But then his price started falling, so then I was kind of back in and buying the dip, because it seems like teams are still in, and that's what I care about more. It's what the NFL teams think and what kind of capital he's going to get. And he's still got an interesting profile. He's still productive. He's still deep threat. He's just really, really skinny, like really, really skinny. The weight was a little troubling, but maybe he really had the stomach flu or whatever that day. But then why didn't you run faster than he was fast. He was fast. That's maybe not fair.
The question is the durability, like you said. And I think that's something that whoever takes him, you got to have a plan for him. I didn't think I'd be talking about the Chargers tonight, and again, the stuff that's been coming up the last few days, you want to ignore it, but it's hard to ignore it. Jim Harbaugh coached J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. He said, I feel like a month and a half ago, that J.J. McCarthy was the best quarterback in this draft. I'm not saying that they're going to make some sort of blockbuster move and they're going to get McCarthy. However, if they choose not to do that, They could obviously trade down. And they have a need at tight end. They have a need at wide receiver. Joshua Palmer and Quentin Johnston are the two big guys they have on the outside. And I use big in quotation marks because we don't know how big the game of Quentin Johnston is. And Joshua Palmer has been inconsistent at best. They need somebody there. Now, whether it's a receiver or a tight end, they got to get somebody, and they could get Bowers as well. With Justin Herbert already showing that he can get the ball downfield to Mike Williams, that he can find Keenan Allen when Keenan Allen's open, isn't this a really good spot if you were a rookie like Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brock Bowers, whoever? Isn't this a spot that you want to be in with the Chargers?
Yeah, and I mean, like you say, I mean, there's got to be a huge opening. And I hate to say it's always like open targets when somebody leaves, but there's a bunch of open targets now that Keenan's gone. And there's nobody with any damn talent that can step in. And that's the thing about wide receivers. It's like, yes, it's a skill. You have to earn targets. But we've seen that, like you say, when Josh Palmer is significantly better than the next wide receiver, that's not good. I mean, Quentin Johnston was terrible. I mean, to put it lightly, you say, yeah, he's big and his catch radius was non-existent, which we were worried about coming in, with the body catching. But I mean, this is a place that, like you say, like Rome Odunze or even like Brian Thomas could make a lot of sense here as well. Somebody like even, if they move down, maybe getting Lad McConkey or Donnie Mitchell, they need somebody that can make, be a playmaker here. Brock Bowers would be awesome, I think. Herbert would be great and can use him. I mean, I think Herbert's great. I just worry about Harborough, like calling the plays. It's like, and then some of the stuff he says, like not even wanting a wide. And I'm like, come on. Like you have to take some, like they have to take someone semi-early, right? Like you have to.
I mean, it's almost, it would be egregious unless they're giving him the Aaron Rodgers treatment where, Herbert's good enough to make Palmer and Johnston and all, whoever we put out there, he's good enough to make those guys good. We don't necessarily need a guy. Well, for fantasy, I hope they choose to pick a guy pretty high because I think he could pay off big time in fantasy. Yeah. I want to end with this one, and I think the Las Vegas quarterback situation is probably the most interesting one. I don't know what Denver's doing. I mean, I understand they're probably going to go after a quarterback, but after this Zach Wilson trade, I mean, who the heck knows? But the Raiders really don't have anybody. They got Aiden O'Connell and they got Gardner Minshew. Neither one of those guys to me seems like a long-term guy. What about the Las Vegas quarterback? You have Devontae Adams there, who obviously can make a lot of quarterbacks look good. See Aiden O'Connell, 2023. You have Zamir White and maybe another running back that they add there. The offensive line is not bad. I mean, it's not great, but it's not bad. The Las Vegas quarterback area, is that a spot that you'd be excited about for a rookie quarterback to get in right away for Superflex leagues this year and be a difference maker?
Yeah, I would be pretty excited about it. I mean, like you say, the path to starting is there, and that's something we want. I think the most buzz I've heard lately through the grapevine has been on Michael Penix, possibly being taken there, possibly the first round even, I've heard. I've also heard that they have a pretty big interest in Jaden Daniels, but obviously I'm not sure how feasible that is.
It would take a lot.
It seems like I've also heard that he wants to be there too. So I don't know. Maybe they are willing to give up a hell of a lot. And I think that would be phenomenal. I mean, way better than the Patriots.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, by the way, it's always phenomenal to pick the brain of Stephanie Miller from Legendary Upside and Ship Chasing. Can you tell us, besides following you on the X at Steph Miller 57, where else we can consume more content from you, not only now, but throughout the start of the NFL season as well?
Well, anything I'm writing is going to be on Legendary Upside for the most part. So you can go ahead and go over there. And we have yearly subscriptions available, and I don't want to promise, but we did have some promotions as well, but we'll see if those are still available that can help with your getting things. And let me see. Sorry, I totally lost. I'm horrible at promoting myself. Well, I start backing up. But this Thursday, I'll be doing a draft party stream on Ship Chasing, so you can catch me for that. And in season, I will be on there on Thursday nights as well. And then in the Discord, I'm in Ship Chasing Discord and Legendary Upside Discord, and hanging out around Deposit Kingdom in general. You can find me.
And the waiver piece will be on legendaryupside.com this fall.
It will.
Excellent. That's awesome. Steph, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. This was so much fun. I learned a lot. You reinforced my beliefs about certain rookies. You also got me to open up my mind to some other rookies I thought I had my mind made up on. Now I'm not so sure, which is great because we still got 48 hours to figure this out, and then we'll see these guys in new uniforms. Stephanie, I want to thank you, our producer, Matt Deutsch. We'll be back at 7 p.m. next Thursday. We're going to split the hours up. First hour, Fantasy Pros, Thor Nystrom will come on. He'll talk about those landing spots and what it means maybe from, I don't want to say a non-fantasy standpoint, but more of a wide scoping standpoint. And then RotoWire's Alan Soslowski will come on, and he'll give us the skinny on rookie drafts, where these guys are going, where these guys went, where these guys should go. That will be next Thursday. Check out the Empire Leagues, Dynasty Leagues, the Fantasy Pros Championship, our Best Ball Tournament and Superflex Best Ball Tournament, all at FFPC, myffpc.com. For Stephanie Miller, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Enjoy the draft. We'll see you next week.